to put it in just simplest terms, is that people think that they are either are a math person or they are not a math person, and usually they're telling themselves in their brain that they are not a math person, right? And so even just dispelling that myth, because something that I've learned in my 10 plus years of working with students at all ages is that every student I've ever worked with is far more mathematically capable than they realized.
Welcome to Innovating Education, the podcast where we explore transformative ideas and solution-driven conversations to reshape the educational landscape. I'm your host, Dr. Riley Williams, and today we're diving into a topic that's close to many people's hearts, whether they love it, fear it, or try to avoid it altogether: math. Now, I'll be honest, math was never my favorite subject. I didn't struggle with it by any means, but I also didn't see much value outside of a classroom. That changed when I became a certified industrial hygienist. Suddenly, math wasn't just about solving equations on paper, it was about protecting lives. Now, there were days when I had to calculate ventilation rates to ensure that workers weren't being occupationally exposed and breathing toxic chemicals. A simple miscalculation could mean the difference between a safe and healthy work environment and more serious consequences. That experience taught me something important. Math is everywhere. It's not just about numbers on a page, it's a tool that empowers us. And yet, so many struggle with it because they were never taught in a way that made sense to them. That's exactly what today's guest, Darren Finnegan, is working to change. Darren is a mathematics educator, entrepreneur, and founder of tutormymath.com. But what makes this story compelling is that he wasn't always a math person. In high school, he was completely calculator dependent and even chose a college major that required as little math as possible. That all changed when a great teacher helped him see math in a new way: intuitive, creative, and even enjoyable. He went on to major in mathematics, earning a master's degree and starting his own company dedicated to helping students, especially adults, overcome math anxiety and succeed in college algebra. Through his work, Darren challenges the traditional approach to math education, moving away from rote memorization and instead focusing on problem solving, creativity, and confidence building. His mission is to help people see that they are capable of learning math and that it can even be fun. I'm thrilled to have him on the show today to talk about math anxiety, growth mindset, and how we can innovate the way we teach math. Darren, welcome to Innovating Education.
Thank you, Dr. Riley. It's great to be here.
Let's start at the beginning. Can you share a bit about your journey? What led you to being, as you've described, a calculator dependent student to a math educator and entrepreneur?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. I really appreciate that introduction. You hit on a few of the points already, and I love what you said about yourself, about you never struggled with math necessarily, you just didn't see the value in it, right? And I think for me, I was always just a B student. I always had a hard time paying attention in school. Specifically in math, I had a hard time focusing, didn't find it particularly interesting, and didn't have a lot of confidence. And I think by the time I was in high school algebra, I just didn't have a strong foundation. And so I was very heavily dependent on the calculator, still not really paying attention in class, and just not really seeing what the point of studying math was. It's like you said, it just feels like solving this equation, and then you move on to the next thing, and what does this mean? And even through college, I was still calculator dependent. It wasn't until I started tutoring and had the opportunity to relearn foundational skills that I was able to move past that. But what made a big difference for me is my junior year of high school. That's the age where we tell kids they need to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And I had no idea. I didn't think I was capable. I didn't have a lot of confidence in any of my skills and in myself in general, but specifically in math. I never thought that I would be successful in any sort of college major or career that was math heavy. But so when it came time to pick a college major, I decided I was going to be a pilot. And so as part of the pilots program at Eastern Michigan University, they required an algebra course, a trigonometry course, and a physics course. And I had already passed algebra, so I thought, okay, maybe I could do that. And then trigonometry, I didn't understand. I had taken it and was like, okay, but maybe I can get through it. And then the physics piece was, I am never going to be able to pass physics. How am I going to do this? And the thought process I had for myself was, I'm going to take it senior year of high school, because when I fail it in high school, at least I will have seen it once. And that was sort of my mindset. That was how unconfident I was at the time, is I expected to go into this class and to fail. But at least I will have seen it once, that when I get to the university level, maybe then I will be more successful the second time. And so, again, just sort of lacking confidence, went into this class, and I just had a phenomenal teacher. And he was just really good at teaching physics. He was excited about the subject, and you just a great teacher. I think he won Teacher of the Year award one of the years that I was there. And more than anything, that got me interested. I was able to pass the class. I got to be in it because I got to be in everything. But that was really the first time where I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'd like to learn more about this. I graduated high school in 2009 during the recession. My dad came to me and said, you can go do this pilot program if that's really what you want to do, but it's going to be very expensive. And I didn't understand what $100,000 worth of debt was at the time. And so I actually decided to do one semester at community college. I'll do that, take some classes, and then transfer to the university. And I took a placement exam. And as part of the placement exam, you take the math portion, and I have my calculator with me, my handy calculator, and they placed me into calculus. I thought, that's not right, because I didn't take pre-calculus. Like, how am I in this calculus class? So I talked to the advisor, and she said, these tests are usually reliable, you should try it. And so I took calculus 1. I got to be in it, because that's the common theme, but that was when I was like, being in college is such a different feeling, being able to be on your own schedule and more choice in where you're going with what you want to do. And so that kept the interest going. And that one semester at community college turned into a 2-year associate degree in engineering. And then from there, I remember it was just one day I was in one of my advanced math, it was like Calc 3 or something like that. And the professor said, raise your hand, who here are actual math majors? And I don't know, for some reason I raised my hand, even though I wasn't, but that was the first step. And what really, the big change where I really decided this is what I was going to go for was the last semester of my at community college was a course called Differential Equations, right, which is the highest level that they offer and one of those engineering type applied math courses. And it was only 6 of us in the class, and twice a week, me and 2 other of my classmates would meet for an hour before the lecture just to get the homework done, understand the concepts, work together a little bit. And I found that I was the one always up at the board trying to explain to everyone else what was going on, and that motivated me. That was the thing that I suddenly was studying. I was suddenly preparing before these sessions. I was trying the homework. I was rereading the sections. So when I got there, I would be able to help my classmates. And that was the big thing. Suddenly I realized when I'm helping others or when I'm teaching others, that motivates me to want to get good at this stuff. And that was the first class I ever got a 4.0 in. And then I transferred to a university, was a math major, continued to be part of study groups and make friends through that. And from there, my grades just went up, and suddenly I was understanding the concept, I was engaged in it, and got a job at a tutoring center, went from there. That's how I went from not really having any interest in it to suddenly, oh, I want to learn more about this, and now I found my own way into being successful in it. Does that make sense?
It does. But I would like to take a quick step back.
Please do.
You mentioned that a great teacher helped unlock your potential. Yeah. What did they do differently that made math finally click for you?
And again, I think it was really just that he was a great teacher. It was really just that he made the subject interesting. And I think that's what really we're missing in a lot of cases, is that there's no interest. In a math class, most of the students aren't really that interested in what they're learning because the teacher doesn't bring that enthusiasm and that excitement. And that's really what this teacher did differently, is he made it fun, he made it interesting, he made you want to understand it. And it wasn't that he necessarily made it easier or anything like that. He challenged us to work through concepts, right? So it's not about making it easier for the students. It's just about getting them to engage with it. And that was the thing that really just, that interest of, oh, suddenly there's a reason. I see why I've spent all these years learning how to solve this type of equation and this type of equation, because it does actually apply in the real world. Suddenly, oh, cubic equations, that's a thing I've heard of, and here it is in this specific example. And obviously cubic equations don't come up that much in a elementary physics course, but as I can see now the benefit of being able to solve a polynomial. That suddenly makes sense for me, and it's not just some arbitrary thing that you're doing, right? That was really that big thing, is the interest was there and the connection to other things that I learned, and it just all came together, if that makes sense.
So, did he provide any hands on examples in his instruction?
Oh, absolutely. He did all different sorts of experiments. The one that most physics teachers do that comes to mind is the one with the bowling ball where you put it next to someone's head and then you let it swing and it doesn't hit them. But yeah, I remember doing all sorts of fun things like standing in a circle and understanding how electricity works by squeezing each other's hands and doing stuff like that. And again, yes, that just makes it a little bit more engaging and a little bit more fun to make you want to understand that these equations mean something in the real world, and you can actually see some of that.
Well, I'd like to dive in a little bit
Yeah,
more into math anxiety. Now, you
absolutely.
specialize working with adults who experience math anxiety. What are the common misconceptions that people have about their ability to learn math?
That's a fantastic question. And I think the main one, to put it in just simplest terms, is that people think that they are either are a math person or they are not a math person. And usually they're telling themselves in their brain that they are not a math person, right? And so even just dispelling that myth, because something that I've learned in my 10 plus years of working with students at all ages is that every student I've ever worked with is far more mathematically capable than they realized. And again, I think that was true for me. I definitely, looking back on myself in my earlier years, I realized that's true for myself. But I've worked with so many students where they are saying, I don't care, I don't get this, I don't want to learn this, right? They have that resistance there. And I'm saying to them, yes, but you have the capability. I can see it in you, right? And when I started actually tutoring, I worked for a woman named Lori. And Lori was an incredible educator. She taught me everything that I know about education. And the main thing that she taught me is that whether she was a volleyball coach, right? She was a math teacher and volleyball coach. And her whole philosophy was education is about confidence, right? And it doesn't matter if you're teaching people to play volleyball or to study math, right? It's less about knowing the skills and more about instilling confidence. And so that was a great way for me to start down the road of education, was having someone like Lori to teach me some of those things. And so as I'm working with adults now, it's interesting. So I put up free events for people to come in and math anxiety discussions. It's fascinating to see the types of people that come to these events. But again, it's looking at, okay, what is your mindset about math? Are you telling yourself that you're not a math person, that you're not capable? What is your current mindset, and how do we start to change that so that we are building confidence, right? And studying math, I would say maybe this is another misconception, right? Studying math is not about getting to the right answer. And then that's in schools so much what we do is it's whether or not you got it right or wrong. And I think that's a big part of where that anxiety comes in, because if you don't understand it and you have a test coming up, or you're taking the test and you don't know what you're doing and you're making mistakes, you're getting things wrong, that's where the anxiety starts to come in. But that's not what math is about. It's not what learning is about. It's about being open to making mistakes. It's about being able to try something and getting it wrong. And I love one of your other guests, I think, said this really well. I think it was Dr. Sparcello, talked about creating safe spaces, right? If you're making mistakes and getting punished for that, that disincentivizes you from trying new things, right? And that is so true in studying math. So when I'm working in my adult group, what I tell people is, to preface things at the start, is that this is a safe space and this is the time and the place. This is where we are going to make mistakes. And that will be uncomfortable, and I want you to lean into that. I want you to lean into stepping outside of your comfort zone and being open to making mistakes and getting things wrong and being able to say, I don't know. If I ask you a question, saying I don't know or starting with I don't know is a good first step. You're allowed to acknowledge that for yourself. But then where do we go from there? And then we say, okay, what do you know? What can I start bringing in? And I really try to create that of, okay, you're saying to yourself, you're not a math person. Let's analyze that a little. Let's just at least keep track of what those thoughts are. And when I do ask a question, just try it. Try your best and start thinking about what thoughts do come to mind. What do I know? And again, just be open to, if you can't come up with an answer or you come up with the wrong answer, that's okay, because that's how you learn. We're here to really just explore this uncomfortable space of being okay with making mistakes. And I think that's where that mindset shift starts to take place.
So, how can we translate that into a classroom where it's okay to make mistakes?
I'm a big proponent of interest-based learning, right? And being able to say, this is what I'm interested in. How do I start to explore that world a little bit. And how do we allow students to make mistakes and say it's all right to make some of these mistakes? I think it would make a lot more sense just to have students have a strong foundation. So if you don't understand fractions, decimal concepts, I don't necessarily think we should hold students back, but I feel like we should focus on sharpening those skills. And again, combining that with interest-based learning. If you can find a way into math that is connected to something that you are interested in, because math is connected to every single subject, right? It's like, how do we get, and again, referencing one of your other episodes, I think it was Dr. Ben Foster, who talked about the difference between inspiration and motivation. And he made a really good point about the difference there, that motivation comes from within, whereas inspiration is something you can get from something else, from somebody else. So how do we inspire students to want to learn some of these things? How do we connect it to something that matters to them? And again, like when I was thinking about what I want to do for the rest of my life as a junior, I didn't really know, because I don't think I knew what I was interested in, because I knew I wasn't interested in any coursework. So somehow we need to have a shift there from this is what's required to be learned to what is it that you are trying to learn? What is it that you are interested in? And I know that I try to bring the energy that I have towards the math that I'm working into my adult course so that we can build that interest. And my philosophy when I'm teaching, I like to sometimes throw in advanced math concepts into what I'm teaching, not to try and confuse my students, but just get them to realize like there's so much more and there's all these interesting ideas in there that you can connect it to. And so I just, again, I think there's something about interest-based learning that we need to really seriously start thinking about, because I think in the future it's less important to be able to recall specific pieces of information. This is where the creativity comes in, right? It's what are you interested in? What are you actually motivated or inspired to want to study? Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. Your approach, it
Yeah,
focuses on fostering creativity rather than memorization. What does
exactly.
a creative approach to math actually look like in practice?
And that's a great question. And studying math is not about the memorization, it's not about learning the formulas. Studying math is about asking why. Why does this work? How do you know that this works, right? And again, going back to the things I've learned from Lori and throughout my career, is that when you're teaching somebody, whether it's one-on-one tutoring or a group session, it's not enough to just help them get to the right answer. You have to ask them about what was your thinking? How did you approach this, right? What steps did you take to get from A to B? And it's not even necessarily the algebraic steps, right? We always say show your work and when you're solving this equation, but what thoughts are you having? It's not about memorizing facts. It's about being able to generate new ideas and then work with those ideas to come up with something that hasn't existed in your own brain before. I started looking into how other mathematicians think about how they study math. And there's a great example if anyone's interested in looking this up. It's Claire Voisin. She's a French mathematician, and she talks about her story. There's a great article. And so the point I was making about how there's this feeling that you get when you know that you have the right answer, and what these mathematicians are talking about is actually when they're doing their work, they are not sitting there going through a logical process. It's a creative process because they don't know what the answer is, right? And again, it's coming from a point of it's okay to not know. Now we have to think of ideas in a way that will allow us to come up with what the correct solution might be. And then you go through that logical step. Once you've got the idea and once you realize, okay, this might be correct, then you go through that more logical sort of proof phase to actually verify that your idea is correct. But most of the work that mathematicians do is actually on that first piece of coming up with a new idea. So trying to bring some of that into these math sessions is, again, start to ask why and start to think about what are the ideas that are going on behind this so that I'm actually thinking about something in a way that's not just memorization. Did that make any sense?
It does. As we're talking, and I'm going
Yeah.
off my show notes for a minute.
Please do. Please do.
Um, okay, so I had this idea while you were talking,
Please.
and it was
Yeah.
like, okay, this could be a curriculum or it could be a lesson plan, but what if we asked our students to say, okay, today we're going to pretend to be a pilot and we have this problem.
Right.
And we can mix up the different values, but we can show, okay, this is how we work on this type of problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now go be pilots, figure this out, or go be industrial hygienists. And you can make that age appropriate and get that interest. And then that also shows the practicality. This is why I might need to know this type of math. I think that could be something that increases interest in math.
And now you're bringing in play a little bit to it, right? And I love what you just said about being a pilot. Yeah, I think bringing in pieces of play and some of those other things is a great way potentially for teachers to help their students engage with some of these things. And I think, the point of a teacher is to bring that enthusiasm and to bring that play and all of those things, because I've been working actually with teachers recently, helping them get through their required courses for their degree. And most of the math curriculum right now is, again, it's just this memorization piece. The last woman I worked with, she was taking, I think the class was just called Math 3 or something like that. And all it was, here are volume concepts and surface area concepts and probability. And like, she just had to learn all of this math. And she's sitting there going, I just want to teach kindergartners. I'm not going to be teaching kindergartners about volume and surface area and all this kind of stuff. And I feel like in a lot of ways, the way that we train teachers doesn't have that creative piece to it. And so by the time they're in the classroom and they're faced with this challenge of, you have this many weeks to get through this much material and you're going to be judged on whether or not you succeed, that's not an environment for fostering creative thought, right? That's not. And I think there's something wrong with that system, and maybe I'm not the right person to fix what's going on in the school system. And that's why in a lot of ways I am focused a little bit more on adults, is that it gives me creative freedom, and I hope that energy and from what I'm hearing from my students, is that it is transferring into the courses that I set up. And it's been really rewarding to see how some of these adults are engaging with the subject. It's been a great experience for me. And so I just hope to show people that there is another way of doing it and keep the conversation going around how could things be better or different.
Now, you do have experience designing courses that make math more intuitive. Can you walk us through one of your lessons and how it transforms the learning experience?
I would love to tell you about the first exercise I love to do with a group of new students is what I call all about circles. And there's a few objectives in this lesson. And so the idea is we're going to take maybe 3 minutes. Everyone has their paper. And again, so we're doing this in a virtual setting, right? I'm working through Zoom. So no one can see what you're writing or what you're doing. You can do this in any way that you want. Just take 3 minutes, write down every single thing that you know or every single thought that comes up about circles. If you know there's a number that has to do with circles or radius and there's another word, just write down what does come to mind. Go through that process and just write as much as you can. Once we've done that 3 minutes, we're all going to come back together and we're going to write down 12 facts about circles. This gives me a general base of everyone's mathematical maturity. Do they know area, circumference, algebraic formulas, pi and irrational numbers? It gives me an idea to see of where each student is at. And so we go through the list of 12 things, and typically everyone knows, okay, there's a radius and there's the distance around the outside. What do we call that? It's circumference. Okay, great. And some people remember the area formula, some don't. And we talk about pi a little bit. And again, I say to my students, don't worry if any of this doesn't make sense right now. We're just reviewing facts, okay? And if you see something that frustrates you, just make note of that feeling, but it's okay if you don't fully understand it right now. The last fact I always save as number 12, and even if somebody shouts it out as we're going through, we put it as number 12 on the end there. The one we're trying to get to is how many degrees are there in a circle? Because most people know this one, and it's built into our language. We say 360 or 180 or whatever, so most people recognize that fact. Show of hands, who knows it? Great. Why are there 360 degrees in a circle? We take a second, pause, and let people think. Everyone knows this fact, but does anyone know why? What is it about circles, when you study them, leads to this idea of 360 degrees? And so we said, and then the number one answer that I get here is people go, okay, there's 90 degrees in a right angle, and if you draw 4 right angles, that gives you a circle. That's a great idea. That's definitely an interesting idea, but why are there 90 degrees in a right angle? What is it about right angles that there's 90 degrees? And it turns out that's actually, you're thinking a little bit backwards. There are 360 degrees in a circle first, and then you divide that into 4 parts, and that's where 90 degrees and a right angle comes from. So again, we haven't answered the question yet of why are there 360 degrees in a circle. Go into the history of it, because another thing that I'm big in is that studying math is studying human history, right? These ideas have existed for a very long time. And so this idea of 360 degrees being in a circle actually goes all the way back to Mesopotamia and the ancient Babylonians. This is 5,000 years old, older than some religious texts. And this is very old human knowledge. There is nothing inherently about circles that gives you 360 degrees. Human beings decided to put 360 in circles together, right? That's more of an invention than mathematical discovery. This is a human invention. And so what is it about this number 360 that, like, why would we associate that? And again, usually at this point, no one really has an answer. We go into the history a little bit. It's like, okay, well, why are there 60 seconds in a minute? Why are there 60 minutes an hour? Why are there 24 hours a day? What is it about these numbers? And 360 is just 60 times 6. And again, these are all facts that the regular person recognizes, but has never really thought about why things are that way. And the reason that we have 360 degrees in a circle and 60 seconds in a minute and 12 hours in a day, or 12 hours on a clock face, 24 hours in a day, is because all of these numbers have a property of being highly divisible. They can be divided by a lot of things. So 360 can be divided by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, by 8, by 9, by 10, by 12, by 15, and all the way down. And so the math course that I teach is called All About Numbers, and we dive specifically into how numbers divide each other. So the circle exercises, that warm-up that gets us to this idea of 360 degrees in a circle, is because it's a highly divisible number. What does it mean to divide numbers up into their parts, right? And that's where we connect it to prime numbers. And so all of these things is you can take a number, you can break it down into its prime factorization. From there, you can understand how to multiply, divide fractions, add fractions, take square roots of numbers, greatest common factor, least common multiple, simplify rational expressions, all of these. And so that's everything you need from a number standpoint. That's everything you need to be successful in college algebra. Right? And so that's the course that we take you through, but I like to just start it with that piece because, again, it allows me to judge where everyone's at, and it's just a very stark way of showing people you can take a fact that is known to you, that there's 360 degrees in a circle, but by asking why is that? And then you get the crickets for a second. So that's really the mindset shift that we're trying to accomplish here. Is it's not enough to just know that there are 360 degrees in a circle. We want to know why that is. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
It does. As we're talking about this, I was also thinking about Chichen Itza in Mexico, the Mayan
Yes.
temples. Did
Yes.
you know that there's this corner of the arena where you can actually speak in it, and it's an open-faced arena,
Yeah.
but somehow mathematically they figured out if I speak in this corner, then the people, you know, 500 feet. I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure how far away it is. It's a great distance, but they can actually
Absolutely.
hear what I'm saying into
Yeah.
this corner. And I just think that's
And
amazing.
like that's understanding of waves and acoustics and all of the, and yeah. And so I've seen that at the science center where you can stand in a concave dome. But the fact that people all those years ago, hundreds, thousands, however, do we really know how long ago that was? They understood these concepts. And again, so like I'm big into looking at the pyramids and whether they're in Egypt or in Mexico, or these structures exist all over the world. And as human beings, we obviously knew things much earlier than I think we give ourselves credit for. That's so fascinating and exciting to me is, yeah, like people knew this. And you can get to that. And that's part of the reason we talk about 360 is we don't necessarily need calculus or some of these more advanced concepts to maybe understand how some of those things work. And it makes you wonder, did these people discover these acoustics just by trial and error? And again, that's more creativity than just studying equations. They probably didn't sit down and write out all the equations to figure it out. They probably just went out and tried things. And that's that was probably a lot of failure that had to happen in order for them to develop that technology. But yes, that is such a cool thing, and that's just so exciting. And that, again, studying mathematics is studying human history, because this stuff has always existed. No matter what civilization or society you look at, they in some way contributed to science and mathematics in their own way. And you're absolutely right. That is such a great example of something that comes from the past that maybe we just don't fully understand that maybe we should.
And there's another
Yeah,
history of math fact I think about often, which was, I guess I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's
sure.
the vertical and horizon. And now, what happens is the mathematician, he was laying down in bed
Hmm.
and there was a fly and he was
Oh,
trying to
interesting.
communicate where the fly was on the wall so that they could kill the fly.
Sure.
And I wish I knew his name. It was so
Yeah.
interesting.
Would that have been Rene Descartes? Because the
Yes,
Cartesian coordinate
yes, that's
systems?
exactly what it
Yeah.
was.
Yep,
Yes.
there you go. Yeah. And again, so if you're interested in history at all, which I think most people are when you're not just memorizing dates, like hearing stories like that is interesting. That is something that you can it's okay, suddenly I understand where this idea comes from. It's no longer just a thing written on a piece of paper. It's a creative thought that some person has. That's a great example. I didn't actually know that one. Obviously, I knew the Cartesian coordinates, but I'm gonna flip that one up. That's a great story.
All right. Well, we need to shift just a little bit. I
Yes, please
want to
do.
talk about calculators. So, a lot of
Yes,
students really rely heavily on calculators, as you say that you did
I
at
sure
one
did. Yeah.
time. How do you help them break that dependency and build on what you call number sense?
Yes, numerical literacy skills. And so for me, the one that helped me really understand how numbers work were these divisibility tricks. And so that's another reason why we talk about the 360 and divisibility is typically when we teach fraction concepts in school, at least from my experience and what I've seen working with my students, is we memorize multiplication facts, then learn division and long division and how to calculate these things. There's an extra skill that I like to throw in there, which is these divisibility tricks. How to tell if one number can be divided by another number. Are you familiar with the divisibility tricks at all? Um,
I don't want to say that I am.
and so most people know the basic one, which is how can you tell if a number is divisible by 2?
Oh, it's
It's
even.
it's even, right? It ends in a 0, a 2, a 4, a 6, or an 8. That's the
Yeah.
trick for 2. And the trick for 5 is if it ends in a 0 or 5. The trick for 10 if it ends in a 0. There's a really cool trick for 3 and 9 where if you take the sum of the digits of a number. So if I have the number 123, can that number be divided by 3? Take the sum of the digits. 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. 6 can be divided by 3, which means 123 can be divided by 3. And the first thing we do is we give these extra set of tools. And I like to encourage my students to think of your math skills as a toolkit. Sometimes you don't always need every single tool, but if you know how to use a tool, then you can solve more problems with it, right? And that, I think, just knowing some of those tricks and how numbers divide allows you to see how to reduce fractions or to find equivalent fractions and how that's connected to proportions and some of these other, right? And so it sort of it builds up from there, but equipping them with this extra set of tricks that I would say it's less than 50% of my students actually learned in school. I'm not really sure why we don't focus more and teach some of these tricks, but so providing extra skills like that is one step. And then the second piece, again, is that confidence of being able to do a problem on your own and then feel confident that you have gotten to the right answer. And I think we're, as humans, the whole thing with the calculator is I want to just get to the right thing right away. When you feel that apprehension of, am I doing the right thing here? The calculator or the computer, or whatever else, is a relief from that because it allows you to just go straight to the right answer. And building those confidence skills up to be able to say, I know what I'm doing, I can do this, I can break these numbers down, I can figure some of this stuff out. That is such an important piece of it in my mind, is having that confidence skills and being able to leverage some of these other mental math tricks. And then just practice, right? The thing about math is, and this goes back to this idea of people thinking that they're a math person or not a math person, is that math is hard. It's not meant to be easy necessarily. It does take work. It does take putting the effort in, and it does take actually working through problems, right? And so the more that you practice some of these mental math skills, and that the divisibility tricks is just one example. I could talk for hours just about the different ways that we can think about numbers, but it's just about rounding out my students' skills just a little bit so that they can do some of these things. And I think that the challenge with calculators, the way I sort of like to explain it when I'm telling to my students why you should learn not to be calculator dependent, is, first of all, from a practical level, standardized tests like ACT, SAT are designed to help students who don't need a calculator. If there's a time save there, a lot of these problems, if you can find the little trick, you can save yourself time to be able to work on the harder questions. That's a practical reason. If you're reading a book and that book is full of big words that you've never seen before, you're not really understanding what the book is saying is if every few minutes you have to reach for your dictionary to look up what words means, right? It's hard for you to comprehend what's going on in the story of whatever that book is if you can't understand the words. If you're trying to solve an algebra problem and all of a sudden a fraction comes up in that problem and you have to stop, take yourself out of the algebra to suddenly go, I don't know how fractions work. I don't know how to do this. So then that's where the calculator comes in. And so now you've directed your attention away from algebra onto the calculator to then do some of these things. So if you have those extra set of skills when that fraction problem comes up in your algebra problem, now you can confidently take care of that piece and continue to be focused on the algebra side. Does that make sense as an analogy between those two things?
It does,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's about practice, building confidence, knowing extra skills, and just being open to putting some of that work in and getting through that initial hesitation of like, I need to reach for something because I don't know how to start, and being able to retrain how you think of it's. Again, it's okay to say I don't know, but what do you know and how do you move forward from there?
So I don't know if I've mentioned this. My
Yeah.
daughter is in fifth grade.
Okay, sure.
And so what's going on with her is I feel like I'm relearning math at the same time.
Yes,
Have
absolutely.
you ever seen Nate Benghazi's bit on Common Core math?
I've heard of it. I've never actually watched it. Can you remind me what he says about it?
In it, he says that he tried to help his kid with homework,
Yeah.
and his wife asked him how he got the answer. And I use the math that they used before
Yeah.
they invented new math. In other words, Common Core. And honestly, that's how I feel sometimes. I know the right answer, but I have no idea how to help Becca
Absolutely.
get where they need us to go. So, if you were in charge of redesigning math education, where would you begin?
And that's such a great starting point because, again, this new math idea is that you have to do it in this particular way. And again, you get the question, even if you get to the right answer. So now we've taken another step because before I'm trying to argue that math isn't about getting to the right answer, it's about making mistakes. But the way that I learn math is in here is that you have to get to the right answer. Right, and that's the goal is to get the right answer. Now we're saying not only do you have to get to the right answer, but you have to take the right path to get to the right answer. It's like now you've narrowed it down to this one thing, and that, like, I don't like that. That's the first thing that I would want to change is because there's so many ways to approach a math problem. That's the beauty of mathematics. That's the whole point is being able to try different approaches and different. And I think it's okay to say, great, now that you know how to do it anyway, let's try to focus in on one specific way to do it. There's not a problem there, but when you're telling your students that there is only one correct way to do this problem to get to the right answer, that to get the points to pass the class, like that is just so far away from the way that we should be teaching math. So that would be the first thing that I would want to change is that idea that there is only one right way and there's a standardized way that everyone has to do math in the same way. No, that is absolutely not true. That needs to go. And then from there, how do we make education more interest based? And I know we already talked about some of these things. Being told that you have to do a problem a specific way, there's nothing interesting there. There's nothing engaging there. That's where students start to struggle because it's like, well, if I don't get it this way, then I'm never going to get it. And then they start telling themselves, I can't do this and I'm not a math person. And that's where those very early on, though, that negative thought pattern starts to spiral in. And actually, you made me think of one thing I would love to just mention real quick on the math anxiety side of things. There's a fantastic researcher out of Ontario who's looked in some of these things. And what her research is showing, the number one indicator of math anxiety in students is actually when a math anxious parent tries to help the student with their homework, that anxiety transfers on, right? And so when you're in that situation of the parents going, I learned it this way, and the students going, yeah, but I think that is just going to heighten that disparity and frustration. So I would definitely, first thing I would change is this idea that there is a correct way to do mathematics. There may be a one true answer, but it's about how you get to it. It's the thought process. It's how you connect things together. That's what's really important about studying math.
Now, with AI, apps,
Yes.
all of these online platforms that are becoming more common, what's your take on the role of technology in math education?
I am excited to see where we go with it. I think it's a tool, and a tool can be either good or bad. It just depends on how we use it. And I like to think compare it to now most students have a tablet or a piece of technology, a computer that they use in classroom as opposed to getting a physical textbook. But we're still just giving students a PDF of the traditional textbook, right? And that's not innovation. That hasn't changed the way that we learn. And if you think about how long the classroom structure has existed, this is an idea that's hundreds of years old and hasn't significantly changed in those 100 years. And I think with AI and some of these other tools, maybe this is the final piece we need to really realize that we can innovate. This is what we're here to talk about, innovating education, is we can really change up the way that the classroom or that teachers engage with their students. And for me, again, going back to this piece about creativity, I think that these tools are here. The AI tools, we already got them. They're already changing the way that we think and do work and all of these things. And again, it's not about retaining facts anymore, because most of us have this tiny little rectangle that allows us to access pretty much all human knowledge that's ever existed. You can access it instantly from this tiny little thing that's in your pocket. And we're in an unprecedented age where access to knowledge is huge. And you no longer really need to memorize facts anymore. But what we really do need is a society of people who can think analytically and creatively and be able to take knowledge and be able to leverage that and turn it into something new and exciting, right? That's what creativity is. And that's really sort of the point that I'm here to make, is that you can do that through mathematics. You can do that through any subject. You can do that with any sort of knowledge, as long as you have that interest and you're able to work with it. I think that if you are interested in a thing, you will want to learn more about it. So that's your inspiration, that's your motivation to actually try and learn it, right? And so you won't necessarily want to have an AI remember those things for you. You want to learn them for yourself. But again, I think what exciting about AI is that now not only can I access information, I can change it and manipulate it. And I get so frustrated with ChatGPT, because I do use it, right? I use the tools. I'm trying to understand how they work, and ChatGPT wants to just do everything for me. It's yes. Like, okay, I'm going to be on this podcast today, and here's a page of notes that I've written, and I want to just maybe think through these and try to clean it up. And then it's okay. I put in my information, and then it just automatically puts out a script. It's, no, I don't want you to rewrite it necessarily. I want you to challenge me on it and help me think. And so I think maybe the tools aren't quite there yet, but there's definitely, again, it's about how we use them and how can we leverage these tools to build a society of people who think creatively and access information freely, use it and turn it into something new and exciting. I am very excited to see where this takes us. I hope that it allows us to innovate how we structure classrooms and education. I don't think it necessarily has to be a bad thing, but I do think it's going to change how we do it, because we've already got equation solvers and all of these things that a student, if you're just being based, your grade is based on homework, you don't have to do homework anymore because the computer can do it for you, right? Somehow we need to see a shift in creative thinking and how we train people. And I would love to just briefly mention, a few weeks ago, the World Economic Forum report on basically the future of jobs. And they talked to companies and compiled all this data on what are the most in-demand skills going to be. And the number one skill is critical thinking skills. The number 3 skill that employers are looking for is creative thinking skills. And actually, none of the skills have anything to do with retaining knowledge or acquiring knowledge in a specific domain. It's all about personal resilience and creative thinking and some of these things that are a lot less tangible than just knowing a lot about technology or knowing a lot about a specific domain. So even the job market is already moving in this direction of, we need people who are quick to be able to adapt to change, who can withstand a shifting work environment, who can think creatively and analytically about new information. And AI, I think, is at the forefront pushing this expansion. And again, it's just a tool. And we need to understand how the tool works and how we can leverage it to do things differently, because it is here and it is already changing things, and we need creative thinkers. So how do we make that happen?
Now, do you use technology in your own teaching methodology?
I do. There's a few great math applications out there that I would love to highlight. The first is GeoGebra. It's a great little tool for drawing shapes. You can basically, draw some geometric figure and then adjust the radius of the circle. And then if that's tied to some other thing, then all of the shapes start moving and it can show you all the different numbers. It's just a very hands-on, easy way to start playing around with geometry concepts that I think everyone should go in. And again, that play piece, I sometimes just love to let my students have at it. I just go and start trying things. The second one is the Desmos graphing calculator. And again, when I typically show that to my students, I show them a few basics, and then I just let them play around a little bit and just figure out how it works. And that's the graphing calculator app I use for myself when I need to graph a function, or if I have a question about something, I'll use Desmos. It turns out that it is now also the one that they're going to be using on the SAT, the digital version of the SAT. There's, again, a practical reason for a student going and learning it, but it's a tool. It's completely free. You don't even have to put an email address in. You don't have to sign up, anything like that. It's just a completely free graphing calculator that can do all of these amazing things. So again, I like to just let my students play around with that. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can do all sorts of crazy functions. It's just a fun way for them to learn it, but there's a good reason for that, is that it's going to be the one you see on the SAT, and as a mathematician, it's the one that I think it's a great tool to start playing around with. So those are just two applications that I can think of right off the bat that definitely I think all students should go in and play around with and be familiar with. And then, I do everything virtually through Zoom, so I'm always trying to bring in different applications and that kind of stuff from an education standpoint, as well as try and figure out what's the best way to manage all my content as I'm creating things and creating new lessons. There's definitely an aspect there of a few different ones that I've tried. But yeah, I think and actually something that's really exciting to me right now is I'm learning, I'm going back and trying to learn Python again, because it's one of those things. I had a career as a data analyst before I really got heavy into math, so I learned Python from a data science perspective. I use it as I'm working on my own research projects, and now I'm actually trying to write a game using that tool. And so that's another, writing computer code and being able to play around with, that's another avenue that overlaps with math that I want to start bringing some more of that into the classroom as well, to let students play around and build their own things. Because again, when you're building something, when you're trying to create something by writing code or whatever else, that's creativity. That's actually creating something that didn't exist before. Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of room to be using some of these tools that I just don't think we're leveraging properly right now.
So, what is one thing you wish more educators and administrators understood specifically about math education?
Yeah, it's not about getting to, we're so focused on getting students to this particular point, and the whole standardized test, and I teach standardized tests because it's a reality, but I hate them. The idea that we all have to get to this certain point, no, that's not what we're trying to accomplish here. And if you allow your students to have more of a creative approach to things, they will be far more engaged with it. I think that just doing mathematics differently can bring some of that fun back into things, and that is what I would want educators and policymakers and administrators, whoever it is let's tap into that. Let's try to bring some of these, let's bring fun back into it. You know what I mean?
I love it. Yeah. And this has definitely been a fun conversation, let me tell you.
Glad. Yeah, I've had a fantastic time. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of these ideas.
So before we wrap up, where can people connect with you to learn more about what it is you're working on?
Absolutely. The website is tutormymath.com. That's TUTOR, not TUDOR, as the last person who reviewed me thought it was. Tutormymath.com. I've got information about my programs on there. But I would love to just say, if you're a fellow educator, if you are interested in networking and building communities around virtual education, definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let's connect there. I'm all about networking and sharing ideas and collaborating. As a business person, I believe in collaboration over competition. So let's connect on LinkedIn. I've got pages on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the socials. You can find me there, tutormymath or tutormymath.com. But yeah, I would love the opportunity to just talk to anyone who's interested in learning more or has ideas. I'm big into that. So definitely please connect.
Darren, thank you again so much for being here today. To our listeners, if today's conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with fellow educators. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review so we can keep bringing you insightful conversations that push the boundaries of learning, leadership, and innovation in education. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, keep learning and keep innovating.